but I am not prepared to put together some snappy doodle, incremental, this is how we're going to pay to repave Keniston kind of thing. Nor will I respect social enterprise and some of the folks that are after that. I worked on that. I think it has a hugely valuable role to play, but I don't think it's the backdoor solution to major financial problems. I don't agree with people who say we don't need more money for housing. We actually do need more money for housing, and we do need social enterprise solutions. We do need to have things that recognize people's independence and give them independence in their relationships, that they actually can be entrepreneurial if they would like to be, but they shouldn't have to be to participate. So there's a lot of good ideas out there. Repeat the question again.
The question is, what are you going to do to raise revenues?
Okay.
To meet the charter's responsibilities.
So what I'm going to do is take the first year. I'm going to put forward some series of ideas about what we need to do. The cities does not have the capacity to raise the revenues in any reasonably progressive way that would recognize social equity and fairness and affordability on its own. We will do what we can with what we've got, and I will lay out some of the ideas. I already have carbon financing and things like that I think can bring new revenue in for ecological tree restoration and lots of things. I've got some ideas on how we can fund housing. But at the same time, last time when we got the gas tax from the federal government, we got GST exemption from the federal government, we got the province to step up and fund 50% of ambulance. Those were all things that came through a process. I am going to spend the first year after you get elected, because the fiscal year is starting right in January, the budget's written. There's no point trying to rewrite the 2023 budget, because it's going to be Scott Gillingham's and Brian Bowman's budget. I don't like that budget. I don't like its commitment to library services, but I'm not going to change that in the first 3 months. Going to do what I did last time. Major engagement for an entire year. Connie Walker was the person who coordinated that with me. A complete rethink of how we're funding our cities. I want to put that before the people of Winnipeg. I'm not sure what form, but I'm to the point that by the end of that year, we have a concept for a new model of funding cities that is equitable, that closes the service gaps, that can build the capacity of neighborhoods, that can shift around and realize that safety isn't policing, it's inclusive of policing. Because the structure of the budget is so problematic, and to get from the province the authority to actually restructure the budget.
Basically, I know that there are a lot of activities we have to do in the city, but we can't do it on our own. We need to get grants, from the province, from the federal. We need to generate revenue, because part of my plan is to, generate more revenue for the city, because we need more money. If you want to really execute a lot of plans, you need to make sure that you figure out how to get money. I know we rely heavily on taxes right now, but that is not enough to do a lot of projects. So my point is to make sure that we collaborate. Another point I've been thinking about, currently we have a traditional increment approach to our budget, whereby every 4 years, whatever you do this year, you do it next year. I'm going to propose something, it's called a priority-based budgeting. What is important to Winnipeggers? Right? Then let's sit down, because the way I look at leadership is, let us focus on what is important. And I'll give you an example of what I've realized. At times I look at some roads. Are we supposed to do this road again this year? But it is part of the budget. We have already approved that, right? But there is a need for us to review and assess. And the moment we have an understanding, we can shift our focus to what is important. Then we can even use part of the funding, to even take care of those things that really matters.
Okay, so you've said you've got your, go to the province and the feds. Are you, what's your tax plan? What are you raising? Business taxes, property taxes? What do you think, like directly what you could do as mayor?
Yeah, for me personally, I'll be honest with you. For now, I'm not planning to increase tax. And if you look at my plan, because most of my plan is focusing more on how we can sustain our city right now. Number one, my major concern is about homelessness, addictions, and mental health. We are going to focus on that one. It's not that we are not going to focus on infrastructure, business, environment, but what is really important now. So I'm not planning to raise.
Sorry, go ahead and finish. I was just going to say, don't answer those questions because I'm going to ask you about those in a bit.
Okay, okay. So I'm not planning to raise any tax right now, but we have to use the resources we have at hand because what I've seen right now is I've been talking to Winnipeggers. Most of them are like, it's getting difficult to live in the city. If you want to add more right now, it would be like a pain. So I feel like, this is not the right, from my own perspective, this is not the right time to increase tax.
Now, I actually want to generate a lot more revenue using the downtown surface parking lots. So it's essentially changing the assessment criteria to assess those downtown surface parking lots as if they were a four-story building. This is going to generate about $36 million. And the goal is then to use that revenue to actually fund other things in our city. 20% of our downtown is surface parking lots. 20% of that is owned by governments. And we talk about having to revitalize downtown with big projects. Maybe it's just a number of small little projects that are actually going to get us there to having a beautiful, thriving city, and not really having a city where we're always thinking, oh, it's got to be this massive, beautiful, incredible project that's going to make everything better. It's not often those things. It's, as Jane Jacobs says, it's those little things that make a city. Land developers and speculators tearing down our heritage buildings and really preventing the city from going forward. And they have been doing so for a long, long time.
Property taxes, what have you taken positions on either of those?
Well, here's an interesting thing. I have taken a position on property taxes. There will be increases to the property taxes. Obviously, we have to also respect people's capacity to pay. We know it's a very tight time for a lot of individuals. People can't really afford a lot, and that impacts everyone, whether you're a renter or a property owner. So we still have to respect people's capacity to pay. So that's extremely important. But we think we can actually be much more creative in going after this land speculators downtown to actually generate more income for the city.
One way is to maintain the 2.33% of the city budget, the increase to the city budget, and directing that 0.33% to active transportation. Until I understand what the city budget allocation amounts are in specific departments, will I be willing to increase the property tax increases. One suggestion was 7.33. I believe the city could put that into the next multi-year budget process.
Everything in the entire world is easier when there's a little more money to be had. My campaign is focused on raising money, on making money, and not just for the city government, not just tax revenue for the city, but also for all Winnipeggers. Private sector incomes in Winnipeg have not increased in 20 years. Do you know that? It's horrifying. Gas has gone up, housing has gone up, groceries are gone up. We are in a 50-year peak of inflation right now, and it's affecting Winnipeggers' pocketbooks every day. And the solution to poverty is a job, with a good paying job. It's that easy. And I am the only candidate for mayor that has a commitment and a firm plan and an executable plan that will actually create more jobs in this city. For the last 20 years, Winnipeg has done a really good job of chasing away people who would invest and create jobs in Winnipeg. The pandemic decimated our small business community, who, by the way, provide the majority of private sector jobs. And so there are some very concrete plans that I have. One is to finally realize the opportunity that Centreport represents for us. For 14 years, the City of Winnipeg has failed to make the appropriate investment, which is to run sewer and water out to the land at Centreport in Winnipeg. And in 2018, the cost of that was going to be $30 million. In 2022, the cost of it is now 80. Thank you very much for the delay. We might as well have lit $50 million on fire by not doing it. The outcome is 16,000 high-paying jobs for Winnipeggers and $80 million a year of brand new tax revenue to the city coffers. That is the equivalent of a 12% tax increase on every ratepayer today. And my goal is to increase the number of jobs and to increase the amount of tax revenue through making Winnipeg the Canadian leader in growth and investment.
City Hall right now is blaming that mostly on the pandemic, but it was an issue beforehand. And so the first thing I would like to do, I think we have to look to like coming into this stage of out of the pandemic, we're also facing some pretty significant inflation issues, and so I think that we're going to end up seeing some pretty good challenges for people who are lower income. It's going to be pretty challenging. So I would prefer not to look at raising the taxes just right now. I would need to get a deep dive into the finances and really see what's going on in there and figure out, each of the different budgets. I think that there is really a lot of room for improvement right now. The other thing I would want to do is look at, a lot of the fees and, that we're charging as a city, see if there's room to improve on those. And are there ever other sources of revenue that we can bring in rather than simply raising taxes right now? And if at the end of the day, we look at that over the, the course of the first year and we decide that, that's not enough, then that would have to be an option down the road for sure.
I've committed already, I've gone public with this at the time of this taping, that I would raise property taxes 3.5% per year for the term of council each year, and a one-time increase to the frontage levy as well, to raise the necessary revenues to make sure that our infrastructure and capital programming is funded strongly, but also to make improvements on our operating side to make sure that services are better delivered and an enhancement to our services for the people of Winnipeg.
When we talk about revenues, we always say, oh, well, the only way to raise revenue is through property tax. Well, it's a form. It's one way to raise revenue, but you'll have heard me announce, and again, the only person who understands the reallocation of 10% of the police budget, the platform fee for Airbnbs for short-term and long-term rentals. These are things that we have every right to levy fees on, right, or have fees or levies on. I think that a conversation we continue to not have at all, which is, again, it becomes quite a concern, is commuters coming from the surrounding areas. I really believe that, yes, the capital region, we are beneficial in so many ways to each other. We welcome our neighbors. We want that coming and going from neighboring surrounding communities. You're our neighbors, we welcome you. But at the same time, when you have one community, one tax base that's continuing to finance all the infrastructure, all the social services, everything that's going on, it is unsustainable. So we just heard about, I heard you say, how do we create a good governance, a sustainable future? Well, we have to start to have everyone pay their share. And we do it in a kind way, we do it in a collaborative way, we do it in a respectful way. Every surrounding community has their own mayor and council. It's their job to advocate for their communities, but it's our job to advocate for ours. And I think that is my position. So that community tax, I haven't really publicly talked about it. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's definitely something that we need to explore.
For clarity, briefly,
please.
Do you have a plan around property taxes up or down, or?
You know what, right now, thank you for that question. Right now I recognize, there is the 2.33 increase. I think that the 2022 budget was 2.33. I think that was the increase, if I'm correct. I believe that's the number. There's a lot of numbers going around in my head. But what I would say is that I don't believe that we could not increase taxes, but then I think it's the balance. It's okay to increase taxes, but we also want to be mindful of, low-income families and people who are already struggling. We don't really want to put that burden on them. So there needs to be some recouping of that for them specifically. That's the balance in my head. How we proceed with that, I look forward to engaging in those conversations at those budget tables, but that's really where my head is at. It's not a no for increase. It's how do we do it in a way that we're not really financially oppressing people who are already in dire straits.
While the tendency is to say we need more revenue, I also want to say I honestly believe most of our social problems, they're not money problems, they're system problems. So when we say, well, we need more, do we need more revenue to resolve homelessness? I would argue we're spending far more money responding to people who are in perpetual and predictable crisis than it would take to solve the problem in the first place with supportive housing. The most researched idea in the history of the country is what is the financial impact of supportive housing on people who are struggling. And it turns out it's cheaper to provide the supportive housing up front. And that, I don't know anyone who argues with that. So do we need more money to resolve homelessness, especially for people who are in constant contact with emergency services? I would argue not. But this is where I think having new financial tools to really value the work that the green economy and the nonprofit economy can provide helps these sectors lean into the very lucrative impacts that love and compassion has on government systems.
So, wonderful answer, but we're still looking at the idea, like, what, as mayor, what are you going to do to actually increase the city's revenues? Because we have an issue around a low business tax. We have an issue around low property taxes and we are told repeatedly that there is not enough money in order to get what needs to get done.
So I think that the taxes are, what the issue is the lack of affordable housing. The issue is the lack of supportive housing. The issue is we're hooking up houses to natural gas. So to me, that's the outcome we're looking for. If the outcome we want to have is around taxes and spending, I would rather have a conversation around the outcome is a reduction in number of families living in poverty, and how is it that we get there? And is that, I guess I'm saying it's not necessarily directly tied to more revenue. And let me give you an example. 9 out of 10 of the people hired at the city since 1999, 9 out of 10 have gone to emergency services. 9 out of 10 new hires. So there's been a lot of money put into the city system, and it's going to responding to people who are in perpetual crisis. So had we increased taxes even more, there would still be these systemic problems that are left there, that are drawing the money away from things that we all value.